cyber to signals intelligence to human intelligence is something that was invested in this money, and I'm glad that the ranking member used this opportunity to talk about those very important issues and the commitment in this bill to start to put us on better footing for that, and I would reserve my time.
The gentleman from Michigan reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm ready to close. Mr. Speaker, I believe many valid points have been made in support of H.R. 754, the Intelligence Authorization Act for FY 2011. First, I want to thank Mr. Rogers for his leadership and for working together in a bipartisan way to do what's right for our country's national security, to make sure that we do our job in our oversight of all the intelligence areas, and I think this, hopefully, we will continue this relationship as we go forward. Now, I also reserve my time.
Gentleman from Maryland reserves. Gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to recommend, I would like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, distinguished member of the House Intelligence Committee, Mr. Nunez.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I really would like to say thank you to Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Rippersberger for really taking the Intelligence Committee and really establishing its relevance back in the House. I know we've had some disagreements over the past, but I think Chairman Rogers, with a lot of new members on the committee, have been working closely with the Democrats in a bipartisan way to, I think, make a real difference to Congress's role in the intelligence community. And I want to commend both of them for their honest work and hard work. It's never easy, because it takes, as I'm learning now, get on the committee, it's a lot of hours. And it's a lot of hours on behalf of the members that they have to commit to this committee, and having a chairman and ranking member to really lead us in that effort, I think, makes a big difference. But let me speak to the issue at hand, and that is that it's very concerning that Congress has not completed an authorization bill in 6 years, even though the terrorist threat has not lessened since September 11, 2001. This has limited an important oversight responsibility of the Congress. The world is too dangerous for Congress not to be more engaged in overseeing 17 intelligence agencies. We simply cannot maintain the status quo of the 111th Congress and ignore our laws that require congressional oversight and authorization of intelligence operations by the House Intelligence Committee. Congress must meet its responsibilities and begin again to pass annual intelligence authorization bills. Annual intelligence authorization bills are vital to ensuring, among other things, that the men and women that really risk their lives to be part of this intelligence community are properly funded to carry out their critical mission in defending our country, such as the one we just saw a couple weeks ago that saw the final killing of Osama bin Laden.
I would like to yield the gentleman an additional minute.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank the Chair. Congress can no longer avoid its responsibilities when our counterintelligence operations provide critical support to our combat units in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and other important places across the world, or when our intelligence agencies require new cutting-edge technology, or during a time of unprecedented unrest in the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and other parts of Central and South America. So this does not mention the ever-growing threat that we face in the cyber community with cyberspace, which is an area that this committee, I believe, will have to spend some significant time on. Also doesn't mention the time that we'll have to spend on some foreign countries that are quickly gaining access to minerals that are very hard to come by, when we have many foreign nations are investing a lot of time and energy and effort into locating not only these. I have an additional minute.
Gentleman's recognized.
These minerals, oil, natural gas all over the world, where we have countries that are coming together that are working, I think, outside the interest of the United States. And we have to have intelligence in these areas. This isn't your typical authorization bill, but it funds 17 intelligence agencies critical to the defense of our country. Each agency has a unique perspective on the world, and Congress should be bipartisan in their partner in these missions throughout the authorization and oversight process. I look forward to voting yes on the 11 bill and look forward to working in a bipartisan way on the 12 bill. And I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Michigan reserves, gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to recognize an outstanding member of the Terrorism Subcommittee, Mr. Bourne from Oklahoma, for 3 minutes.
The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized for 3 minutes.
Hey, Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2011. I want to thank Chairman Rogers. I also want to thank Ranking Member Ruppersberger for working together in a bipartisan way to produce this bill. Their leadership was invaluable to moving this bill forward and has been critical to all the committee's efforts during the 112th Congress. Last year, the President signed into law an Intelligence Authorization Act for the first time since 2005. That bill included a number of important provisions to address the foreign language needs of the intelligence community, including a provision I sponsored which created a pilot program in African languages under the National Security Education Program. I'm glad we can build upon the FY10 bill and get another authorization bill signed into law for the second straight year. This bill authorizes the annual funding for the 16 member agencies of the intelligence community, aligns the national counterterrorism strategy with the policies and strategies of the DNI, and requires the DNI to establish an insider threat detection program to prevent unauthorized leaks of classified information. While this bill is important to our intelligence community's ability to be the first line of defense for America, as we recently saw with the killing of bin Laden in Pakistan, the intelligence community often forms the first line of offense against our enemies as well. Last month, I traveled to Pakistan and Afghanistan and witnessed firsthand the tremendous challenge of locating bin Laden and other members of al-Qaeda. Finding him would not have been possible without the robust capabilities that are available to the dedicated intelligence professionals at the CIA and other agencies. That is why Congress must continue to provide the intelligence community with every resource it needs to complete its missions. Again, I extend my gratitude to Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Ruppersberger for their exceptional work on this legislation, and I also thank the Intelligence Committee staff for their tireless efforts in preparing this year's bill. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Oklahoma yields back. The gentleman from Maryland reserves. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to yield now to a former Army captain, the great new member from Kansas, Mr. Pompeo.
Great. Thank you, Mr.
Gentleman from Kansas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to come to the floor today and thank Chairman Rogers and the ranking member for the great work they've done. I do not sit on this committee, but I did have the opportunity to serve our country in uniform. And we witnessed what happened in the capture of the world's greatest terrorist, and we saw the great military feats which took place. But we also know all the enormous work that our intelligence community did to make that happen. I served in a unit that patrolled the East German and Czechoslovakian border, and every day we relied on the fact that our intelligence community was providing our military with the finest information, the finest data, in as near real time as they possibly could to make sure that we knew how to deploy our forces and we knew the things that needed to be done to keep America safe. So I want to applaud the efforts of the Intelligence Committee. I want to urge all of my colleagues to support this legislation and the intelligence community that keeps everyone in America safe. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Kansas yields back. The gentleman from Michigan reserves. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm ready to close. The Intelligence Authorization Act for FY 2011 provides policy guidelines and sets classified funding levels for the 16 agencies in the intelligence community. Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden is gone forever, but our fight against terrorism is far from over. I believe this bill moves us in the right direction to ensure our top-notch intelligence professionals have the resources, capabilities, and authorities they need to keep our country safe. I also want to acknowledge our staff, both on the Democratic and Republican side, who worked very closely with us together to help put together this bill. I've always said you're only as good as your team. We talk about teamwork. You need a good team and a good staff. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Maryland yields back. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just take this opportunity to thank both the Democrat and Republican staff members who helped us prepare this bill. You know, for the first time since I've served on the committee, we had both Democrat and Republican staff brief in a bipartisan way at the same table, all members in the room. And we think that I think, improved the value of this product tremendously, something we're going to hope to continue on. So my hat's off to all of the staff. We hire professionals from the community of all walks of life as well to provide us the expertise that we need to provide the proper oversight for the intelligence community. And I do believe, in this great spirit of bipartisanship with Mr. Ruppersberger, this will give the tools to those 17 agencies who work in secrecy on behalf of the United States, the things that they need to accomplish their mission and to keep this great country safe. And with that, I would yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentleman from Michigan yields back the remainder of his time. All time for general debate has expired. Pursuant to the rule, the amendment in the nature of a substitute printed in the bill shall be considered as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule and shall be considered read. No amendment to the committee amendment is in order except those printed in House Report 112-75. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report by a member designated in the report, shall be considered read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to an amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 1, printed in House Report 112-75. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan rise?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk made in order under the rule.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 1, printed in House Report Number 112-75, offered by Mr. Rogers of Michigan.
Pursuant to House Resolution 264, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Rogers, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a manager's amendment to the bill. It contains 2 provisions. The first provision would simply clarify that Section 411 of the bill, which relates to certain Defense Intelligence Agency expenditures, applies only to the National Intelligence Program funds. This clarification was requested by the Committee on Armed Services and is largely technical in nature. The second provision would strike Section 412 of the reported bill, which provides for the creation of certain accounts for intelligence funds. While this provision is an important one intended to promote auditability of intelligence funds, some technical issues have arisen, and I believe it was prudent to hold this over until the FY12 bill. It is something that I support and hope to return to the bill in FY12. I do not believe that either of these changes are controversial and urge members to support the amendment. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Michigan reserves the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland rise?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to claim time on the amendment.
Gentleman in opposition?
No, I just rise to
Claim time. Without objection.
To claim time in opposition.
Without objection.
All right. In this era of tight budgets, I believe it is our responsibility to manage every taxpayer dollar efficiently and effectively. Section 412 of the bill provides the Secretary of Defense authority to transfer certain funds into specific accounts to provide more accurate accounting of money spent. The manager's amendment strikes Sections 412 from the bill. Section 412 will allow for an accurate audit of taxpayer dollars. This important tool will save us money in the long run. We must identify programs that are not working and trim those costs. A thorough audit will help us to do that. We must ensure any cuts do not negatively impact on the performance of the mission. The administration supports Section 412, and so do I. Thank you. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Maryland reserves. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
I thank the ranking member. Look forward to working with you on this particular issue. As the ranking member, I think understands, Mr. Chairman, that we've brought in auditors on the committee. This is something we're very committed to in a bipartisan way, to actually have funds that can be audited. It's a bit shocking, I think, to both of us that they have had these funds for such a long time that have not been able to be audited, and we hope to do that on behalf of the taxpayers of the United States. With that, I would yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentleman from Michigan yields back Gentleman from
I
Maryland is
just claim
recognized.
my time, and I agree with the chairman that staff is working together to try to resolve the issues involving Section 412. We look forward to a positive resolution.
Does the gentleman yield back?
Yield back.
Gentleman from Maryland yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Michigan. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
Roll call vote.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized. Requests a roll call vote pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Michigan will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 2, printed in House Report 112-75. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia rise? Gentleman from Georgia is recognized. For what purpose?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 2, printed in House Report number 112-75, offered by Mr. Barrow of Georgia.
Pursuant to House Resolution 264, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Barrow, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Georgia for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin by thanking Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Ruppersberger for their hard work on this important legislation. We face a diverse and growing array of threats around the globe, and we need an intelligence community as diverse as the threats we face. My amendment directs the National Intelligence Director to create a pilot program for historically black colleges and universities to help develop critical language curriculums and study abroad programs. Our defenses have to be as advanced as the means used by our enemies. That means that our human assets have to be as diverse as our enemies. Cultural, language, and educational barriers affect the quality of intelligence we can gather, and it's critical that we have the human assets to overcome these barriers. The area of Georgia I represent is home to several HBCUs with specific expertise in critical languages. Engaging centers of excellence, such as these, will help the intelligence community meet our strategic security goals and will produce more sophisticated intelligence officers. And this, in turn, will make our country more secure. I therefore urge my colleagues to support this amendment and support passage of the bill. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman from Michigan seeks recognition.
Mr. Chairman, while I do not oppose the amendment, I would ask unanimous consent to claim the time in opposition.
Without objection. Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Yield myself as much time as I might consume. While I support the intent behind the amendment, I believe it is also important to note for the record, and I appreciate the gentleman's work on this, that the Intelligence Committee has already a number of existing programs and initiatives in this area. I think this will, in fact, enhance that effort. The proposed amendment has the goal of assisting historically black colleges and universities in creating and maintaining academic curricula that help the intelligence community meet its workforce diversity and critical language goals. I'm happy to say that the community already understands well that a diverse workforce enhances its mission performance. For example, Director Panetta has launched his own initiative at CIA to enhance the diversity of that agency's workforce. Additionally, there are other initiatives underway to increase the employment and retention of the diverse candidates throughout the intelligence community. And I won't go on other than to compliment the gentleman's interest in exposing the number of people who would have the skills to apply and diverse our workforce at the CIA. And with that, I would reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Georgia has yielded back, so the gentleman from Michigan still controls.
Mr. Chairman, I would yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman from Michigan yields back the time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Georgia. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 3, printed in House Report 112-75. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
For the purpose of offering an amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 3, printed in House Report number 112-75, offered by Mr. Dent of Pennsylvania.
Pursuant to House Resolution 264, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Dent, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I first want to commend the chairman and the ranking member for the very good work they've done on this bill. They really have worked in a bipartisan manner, and they're really trying to advance the best interests of the intelligence community and this nation's national security. So I applaud them for the spirit in which they've taken on this legislation. I will withdraw this amendment after having conversations with the chairman. But the point I want to make about this amendment The amendment simply directs the Director of National Intelligence and CIA that within 90 days of this act provide the Congressional Intelligence Committees all information possessed by the DNI and the CIA relating to the pursuit and targeting of one Anwar al-Awlaki by the federal government, as well as an analysis of the legal impediments to pursuing the capture of Anwar al-Awlaki. Americans are all very much familiar with whom Osama bin Laden is. Everybody knows who he is, and we're all extremely gratified about his demise. At the same time, we should all be aware, too, that Anwar al-Awlaki seems to be the leader of many of the operational aspects of al-Qaeda on the Arabian Peninsula. He is a real threat. He is an American citizen. He's also a Yemeni citizen. He has targeted Americans. We always thought he was a spiritual advisor and certainly a recruiter for al-Qaeda. But now it's quite clear he's also gone operational. We're aware of that as it relates to the underwear bomber, Abdul Muttalib, in his attempt to blow up the airliner near Detroit. So the point of this amendment is to raise awareness on Anwar al-Awlaki, also to point out the fact that he is a citizen, point out the fact that I think it's important that we consider essentially that he has committed expatriating acts. I mean, the fact that he has targeted American citizens, that he has called on for the death of many Americans. I think I have legislation that is also prepared, too, that will deal with his citizenship issue, that it should be revoked, or at least we should seriously do that, just as we would for any other individual who takes up arms against this country. We have laws in the books from 1944 when there were individuals who were to sign up with the Nazi army or the Imperial Army of Japan, who took up arms against this country as citizens. Those are expatriating acts. I simply believe that if an individual takes up arms with al-Qaeda or the Taliban or any other terrorist organization, foreign terrorist organization, that is intent on killing Americans, that we should treat them just as we would an individual who is an agent of a foreign government or part of a foreign army. That's the whole point. But recognizing this is probably not the best place to offer this amendment at this time, I have agreed to withdraw it. I appreciate the Chairman's consideration, and I will be working to make sure that this Congress has the opportunity to address the citizenship issue of Anwar al-Awlaki. It has been reported in the press that our government has a killer capture order on Mr. al-Awlaki. I don't know if that is true or not. I read it in the press. Just last week we saw reports that Anwar al-Awlaki was supposedly the intended target of an attack, unsuccessful in Yemen, and so he is still he's still alive. And the point I want to make is that I think that if we're targeting an American citizen for assassination, then I think we should at least take up the issue of his citizenship and revoke it if at all possible. And so at that point, I will address it in another forum. This time I would, again, urge everybody here to support the underlying legislation, and at this time I would withdraw this amendment. I appreciate the Chairman and Ranking Member's consideration. Thank you.
Gentleman seeks unanimous consent to withdraw his amendment. Without objection, the amendment is withdrawn. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 4, printed in House Report 112-75. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 5, printed in House Report 112-75. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 5, printed in House Report number 112-75, offered by Mr. Gibson of New York.
Pursuant to House Resolution 264, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Gibson, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to begin this afternoon by praising the chairman and the ranking member, all the members of the Intel Committee and their staff for truly magnificent work here on behalf of the American people. I spent some time down in the SCIF and have been through the bill, and I think it's something that everyone can be proud of. And clearly the operation that occurred about 2 weeks ago that ended up in the death of Osama bin Laden is an example of how intel and operations can be fused for successful operations. And you know, I'm rising today to offer an amendment to the Intel authorization bill that I hope the committee will be willing to accept. It's based on my experiences from the 29 years I served in the United States military, nearly 5 in the New York Army National Guard, and then 24 years in the United States Army. And I will tell you that particularly my experiences in Iraq, commanding an airborne infantry battalion task force, and then later as a Division G3, that's an operations officer for Multinational Division North, I saw firsthand the virtues of intel and operations being fused for successful operations. And so what concerns me today is the fact that since the 11th of September, we've had significant growth in the intel community to address various concerns. And what I think we need to do now is pause, reflect, and look for ways to consolidate all that growth so that we can continue to have effective intel operations in a manner that's consistent for Republic and one that we can afford. So what I offered is actually a very simple amendment. It asks the Director of National Intelligence to provide his recommendations on consolidation with an eye towards effectiveness and efficiency. When we initially created this position, this, of course, was a result of the Keene Commission after the horrific attacks of the 11th of September, 2001. We created the DNI to help us to really provide leadership in the intel community. In my estimation, we did not provide the adequate budget and legal authorities for him to really accomplish all those duties that we expected of him. So I would think that he would welcome this task. To provide his recommendation to us on how we might better organize, consolidate the intel community to perform its very critical function for the American people. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I reserve the balance of my time and urge my colleagues to support the amendment. And again, I want to thank the Intel Committee, the leadership, and all those who provided the work for this bill.
The gentleman from New York reserves. The gentleman from Maryland.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I rise to claim time in opposition to the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Yeah, I appreciate Congressman Gibson's intent, and I also want to thank him for his service in the military. But I believe we should always be looking for efficiencies to help reduce costs throughout the government. The Director of National Intelligence is conducting a similar review that will identify redundancies without sacrificing core missions. I want to see the product of those efforts before asking the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, to submit an additional report. For this reason, I oppose the amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves from Maryland. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Well, I certainly respect my colleague for all his experiences that he brings before he comes to the Congress and for the tremendous work he's done in the time that he's been here serving the American people in the United States Congress. I respectfully disagree with the position and would like to hear directly from the Director of National Intelligence. I know if I were in his shoes, I would welcome this task. I would want to provide the United States Congress, the American people, by way of the United States Congress, to provide the recommendations on the way that he, in this case, the way he sees fit on better organizing the intel community. So with a very heavy respect for the ranking member, I still urge my colleagues to support.
Gentleman from New York reserves time. Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
I yield back.
Gentleman from Maryland yields back. Gentleman from New York.
And I yield back.
Gentleman from New York yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York, Mr. Gibson. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to.
Yeah, I'd ask for a roll call vote.
Gentleman from Maryland requests a roll call vote pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York, Mr. Gibson, will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 6, printed in House Report 112-75. Gentleman from Maryland, seek
I rise
recognition.
to offer the amendment for Congresswoman Waters as her designee.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
This amendment,
No, the clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 6, printed in House Report Number 112-75, offered by Mr. Ruppersberger of Maryland.
Pursuant to House Resolution Number 264, the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Ruppersberger, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Maryland.
I yield all of my time to Congresswoman Waters.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
I have an amendment at the desk.
The
Thank
gentleman
you very much.
from
If I'm recognized, my amendment requires the Inspector General of the intelligence community to report to Congress on racial and ethnic diversity in the intelligence community. A diverse workforce is essential to intelligence work. People from a variety of backgrounds bring a variety of perspectives to the table to understand the world in which we live. A diverse workforce provides intelligence agencies critical insights into different cultures around the world, where information about potential threats to our national security is being collected and analyzed. Many leading intelligence officials understand the importance of a diverse workforce. The website of the Central Intelligence Agency includes the following statement, and I quote, In order for the CIA to meet our mission of protecting our national security interests, we need to employ a workforce as diverse as America itself, the most diverse nation on earth. Diversity reflects the unique ways we vary as intelligence officers, our nationality, race, ethnicity, gender, age, language, culture, sexual orientation, education, values, beliefs, abilities, and disabilities. These assorted attributes create different demographic, functional, and intellectual views which are so vital to our innovation, agility, collection, and analysis. And I really do think that says it all. And so, unfortunately, there's virtually no data available to Congress and the public regarding the degree of racial and ethnic diversity in the intelligence community. The most recent publicly available report that discusses this subject is a 1996 report by the Government Accounting Office on personnel practices at intelligence agencies, which focused on equal employment opportunity practices. The report concluded that intelligence agencies have workforce diversity programs, but results lag far behind other federal agencies. This report was written more than 5 years before the terrorist attacks of 9/11 and 15 years before the death of Osama bin Laden. Needless to say, both the intelligence community and the world in which it operates have changed tremendously since then. My amendment states that within 180 days after the enactment of the bill, the Inspector General shall submit to Congress a report on the degree to which racial and ethnic minorities in the United States are employed in professional positions in the intelligence community and barriers to the recruitment and retention of additional racial and ethnic minorities in these positions. The amendment requires that the report be submitted in unclassified form, but allows the Inspector General to include a classified annex. It's long past time for Congress to reevaluate the diversity of the intelligence community workforce, and I urge my colleagues to support my amendment. And I thank you very much, Congressman Ruppersberger, for giving me this time, and I would yield back to you whatever time may be left.
Gentlelady yields back to the gentleman from Maryland. Gentleman from Maryland will reserve. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, while I do not oppose this amendment, I ask unanimous consent to claim time in the opposition.
Without objection.
Mr. Chairman, I support efforts to create diverse workforce within the intelligence community. A diverse workforce is instrumental to effectively respond to the complex global threats faced by the United States. I do have some concerns that this amendment is duplicative in for many efforts which are already underway within the intelligence community to address this issue. For example, Section 338 of the Intelligence Authorization Act of 2010, passed after the fiscal year last year, requires the DNI to coordinate with each element of the IC to provide a report of plans to increase the employment and retention of diverse candidates. Moreover, the DNI has already created a strategic plan on equal employment opportunity and issued Community Directive 110, the Equal Employment Opportunity and Diversity Program. I hope, it is my hope, that the Inspector General will consider all of these existing initiatives in the report and use the substantial body of work that has already been done on these issues in completing it. Nonetheless, I will support the amendment and its laudable goals. I would yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman from Michigan yields back the remainder of his time. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
I yield back.
Gentleman from Maryland yields back the remainder of his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Maryland. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 7, printed in House Report 112-75. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have an amendment that I will describe. In 1976...
The gentleman will suspend. The clerk will designate the amendment.
Pardon?
Amendment Number 7, printed in House Report Number 112-75, offered by Mr. Hinchey of New York.
Pursuant to House Resolution 264, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Hinchey, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 1976, amidst social unrest and a deep political crisis in Argentina, a military coup installed one of the cruelest dictatorships South America has ever seen. Illegal detentions, torture, and summary executions of dissidents became routine. Cross-country operations to capture and assassinate dissidents were organized by Argentina in cooperation with Southern Cone military regimes in what is known as Operation Condor. Over the years, as the victims of the repression increasingly went missing, a new tactic of the Argentine security forces was revealed. It is estimated that 30,000 people disappeared in Argentina between 1976 and 1985. Many of these victims, known as the disappeared, were abducted, they were tortured, and then dropped far out into the ocean. During the dictatorship, hundreds of children were born into captivity and distributed to members of the Argentine security forces, while their mothers are believed to have been killed. The identity of some of these children has been discovered, but the majority of their identities and whereabouts remain unknown. My amendment seeks to shed light on the unknown fate who would be now in their 20s. In relationship with their Argentine counterparts in the intelligence, security, and military community, the documentation of the American intelligence community is likely to contain invaluable information to support renewed justice investigations and the search for the children of the disappeared. This amendment that I'm offering would direct the Director of National Intelligence to report to the House and Senate intelligence panels on information it has regarding the human rights violations of the military government in Argentina, and also seeks to help shed light on the unknown fate of the Argentine children who were born in captivity. The amendment instructs the DNI to include an appendix of declassified documents used for the report and gives the authority for the inclusion of a classified annex. Thousands of families have waited more than 30 years to learn the fate of their loved ones, and today we have an opportunity to make a significant contribution to truth and justice and help bring to a close this troubling chapter in Argentina's history. In 2008, this amendment was made in order by the Rules Committee and agreed to on the House floor without objection from either party by voice vote. At that time, my dear friend and colleague Peter Hoekstra said, quote, "I will not oppose this amendment, Mr. Chairman. I will support the amendment." So I urge all of us to join in supporting this contribution to truth and justice in the country of Argentina. Reserve the time.
The gentleman from New York reserves the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I claim time in opposition to the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I must unfortunately oppose this amendment. I certainly can sympathize with the gentleman's intention to try to bring some closure for families in this particularly difficult issue in Argentina. And it may certainly result in some information to those who are conducting maybe historical research and analysis, and certainly to mend the wounds that has been created in this particular situation. It would also do something, I think, equally damaging to today's effort in the war on terror. It would divert the intelligence community from its mission of protecting the United States and our interests from current threats. When you think about how difficult it was to take a small piece of information and stretch a nickname applied to an Arabic nickname applied to someone who is using an alias, who was likely associating with individuals who had Arabic nicknames associated to aliases, and from that little scrap of information, the entire intelligence apparatus spent years trying to develop the right lead to lead us to last Sunday's event to bring Osama bin Laden to justice. This year, the intelligence community came forward and said, we need more analysts. We need more human resources in order to accomplish this mission. There are too many threats in too many places for our people to handle it. And what this amendment does, although it is very well intended, it takes resources away to apply it to a problem that is 20 to 30 years old. I'm sorry, we just don't have that luxury today. We are concerned, the intelligence community is concerned that the next few months, next 6 months, are crucial when al-Qaeda is trying to get its act back together after losing its operational and inspirational leader, and how they reach out or lash out in some kind of an attack. It is imperative that every minute of every day be spent targeting those who are seeking to kill Americans or our allies overseas now. I hope that we find some other alternative to what the gentleman proposes in maybe another way. But redirecting the valuable assets in the fight on terror today, I just think, is a misuse of our resources and may, in fact, be a dangerous one at that. This is not the time to be disrupting our counterterrorism analysts or case officers or anybody in the CIA or other intelligence agencies away from disrupting, dismantling, and defeating al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations for the activities of the government of Argentina nearly 25 years ago, and I would reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How much time do we have?
The gentleman from New York has 2 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Michigan has 3 minutes.
Pardon me?
The gentleman from New York has 2 minutes remaining.
Well, thank you very much, and I deeply appreciate what has just been said. But the fact of the matter is that there is no significant costs involved in this. This operation has been looked at in the past. The information that we are asking for in the context of this amendment is readily available. It's not going to take any significant costs whatsoever, and it can be done very, very quickly. This is a situation that really needs to be corrected. It's a violent, deeply disturbing activity that took place in the context of many, many families, many who were completely innocent. And the effects on that were, in many cases, deeply disastrous. So this is something that can be done easily and can be done quickly. And it was supported by the opposition almost unanimously, in fact unanimously, the last time that this bill came up and this amendment was brought forward. So I ask the opposition here to reconsider this. Think closely about this, how important this is, how significantly important it is for Argentina and for the United States, and how it can be done readily and easily, and how the results of it being done would be happily taken care of by these two countries. There isn't anyone who is going to deeply object to this. Anyone who is significant, at least, in the context of this operation, who is going to deeply reject this. We need to do this. It's an honest thing, and it's something that is going to be positive, and it will be deeply positive and effective for us in the context of bringing this about. So I hope that everyone in this body will recognize the significance of this and vote in favor of it. Thank you.
Time's expired. Gentleman from Michigan's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, with deep respect to the member from New York, and I appreciate your passion on this. But I can tell you as a former FBI agent, when you take 1 minute away from your case to call information, it does take somebody who is operational in some sense, either an analyst or an operator or even in the IT front, to gather, collect, sort that information, to go through it, to put it in the form, and to get it in the right place. And when we are really, every minute of every day is so precious to these individuals who are now trying to focus on al-Qaeda and the current threat, my argument is that this is something that can wait. It's waited 25 years. Probably the next few years won't make a difference. But the next few years in the fight against al-Qaeda can mean the life and death of U.S. citizens. So again, I hope the gentleman doesn't take it that it is any condemnation of his effort. I think the time and the place and the resources that would be lost are just not meeting the national security priorities as we look out across what the threat stream is today. So unfortunately, I'll continue to oppose it. I'd like to work with the gentleman on something in the future. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would yield back my time.
Gentleman from Michigan yields back. The question is now on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The opinion of the Chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
And we'll request a vote on this in the next session we have tomorrow.
Gentleman requests a recorded vote pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 8, printed in House Report 112-75. For what purpose does the gentleman from Delaware seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 8, printed in House Report Number 112-75, offered by Mr. Carney of Delaware.
Pursuant to 4, the gentleman from Delaware, Mr. Carney, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Delaware.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Over the past week, officials have announced that preliminary intelligence gathered from Osama bin Laden's Pakistan hideout shows that al-Qaeda have been plotting a terrorist attack on our nation's rail system. While roughly 1.7 million passengers ride in domestic and international flights daily, every weekday 34 million Americans ride on trains and transit systems. The issue of rail security is more relevant now than ever, and I'm here today to argue for making rail security a national intelligence priority. On March 11, 2004, nearly 200 people were killed in Madrid as a result of a terrorist bombing while riding the commuter rail to work. In 2005, over 50 people were killed and 700 injured on the London transit system in a series of explosions during the morning rush hour. An attack on our rail system here in the United States would be devastating and would almost certainly result in the loss of life. Clearly, terrorist organizations around the world have made rail systems a target, and I strongly believe that we need to address the vulnerabilities in our rail system by ensuring that rail security is one of our nation's top intelligence priorities. That's why I offered this amendment directing the intelligence community to include rail and subway transit security in its transportation security plans and budgets. The 9/11 Commission report found that over 90% of the nation's annual investment in transportation security is spent on aviation security. And while addressing security vulnerabilities within aviation is critical, this allocation leaves too little for the surface transportation security, particularly on our rail systems. For now, riding trains is safe. That's how Transportation Secretary LaHood described the state of our rail system in light of the intelligence found in Osama bin Laden's compound. Well, we need to do better than that. As a near-daily rider of Amtrak myself, I want to know that the United States government is doing all it can to keep my fellow passengers safe. And I urge my colleagues to support this amendment so that our intelligence community is able to identify and prevent a terrorist attack on our rail system. Thank you for your consideration. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Delaware reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I lay claim to time in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
While I agree with the need for strong security in the railway sector, I just don't believe that this amendment is best suited for the intelligence authorization bill, as it seems to address the policy issues that are not authorized or otherwise addressed in our FY11 intelligence authorization bill. The intelligence community does not have transportation security plans or transportation security budgets, nor do individual intelligence community agencies. They would have, in order to meet the requirement of this, they would have to restructure themselves to bring in the right people to do the plans for security for the railway. And I don't think that's what the gentleman intends, but that's clearly what the gentleman's amendment would do. And I would argue that this amendment would be better focused on the Transportation Security Administration, the TSA. That agency, however, falls under the jurisdiction of the Homeland Security Committee and not the Intelligence Committee. The intelligence community does not develop transportation security plans. Rather, the intelligence community, through DHS, provides threat information to the transportation sector to better enable it to develop security plans. Additionally, I note that this amendment simply expresses the sense of Congress on the issue. It does not actually compel any action. And I would question the real improvement to security in the railway sector from its adoption. because, again, it appears that the amendment would not have a real impact. This is really out of the scope of the intelligence community. I would urge the gentleman to reconsider and contemplate maybe addressing it in the TSA, and if the gentleman would like any help and assistance in doing that, I'd be eager to try to help the gentleman do that. But again, given the time pressures on our intelligence community to stop real-time threats and pass that information on to people in the TSA and others, I would argue that this is an amendment that we should all oppose and look for a better opportunity. And with that, I would reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Michigan reserves. The gentleman from Delaware is recognized.
Yes, thank you. I would just like to add that I listened to the gentleman. I appreciate his comments, and I listened to his remarks early on the previous amendment, and he said that the intelligence agencies spend all their time, every waking hour, targeting people trying to kill Americans every day. And the facts are that these terrorists are trying to kill Americans on American rail transit systems, and that's the purpose of this amendment, to make sure that this is given a priority in our intelligence plans. With that, I'd yield 30 seconds or whatever he might need to the ranking member.
I thank the gentleman for his amendment. I disagree with the chairman. I believe it's vitally important that we protect our railway infrastructure from terrorist attacks. Just last week, the Department of Homeland Security issued an intelligence message about potential al-Qaeda contemplation in February 2010 of plots against the U.S. rail sector. While there was no imminent threat at that time, we must remain vigilant. It is important that we devote resources to this issue. I hope that we can work together with the chairman if the amendment does not pass, so that we can focus on this serious area of threat to our national security. I urge a yes vote on this amendment and yield back.
The gentleman yields the time back to the gentleman from Delaware. The gentleman from Delaware reserve.
Yes, I just have a couple more comments. How much time do I have?
The gentleman from Delaware has 1.5 minutes remaining.
Thank you. Just like to add a few more things before finishing up here. Between 2004 and 2008, over 500 terrorist attacks were waged worldwide against mass transit and passenger rail targets, resulting in over 2,000 deaths and over 9,000 injuries. 5 billion passenger miles, intercity and commuter rail, are logged every day in the Northeast Corridor alone here in the U.S. That represents more than 1/3 of the daily vehicles miles logged on I-95 between Washington, D.C. and New York City. My amendment will ensure that the U.S. government places a priority on ensuring the safety of rail passengers around the country by working to prevent a terrorist attack on our rail system, and I would ask support for this amendment. I reserve the rest of my time.
Gentleman from Delaware reserves. Gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you. And again, I appreciate both the gentlemen's perspective on this, but this is about the right tool for the right job. The intelligence community is the one that's supposed to develop the intelligence, the threat stream, the lead, and pass it to somebody who is in charge, the TSA in this case, of protecting the transportation sector. So again, I make the argument, it is important. But I just think this is misplaced. So we're going to try to the intelligence community would have to try to create this expertise of which they do not have today in the entirety of the intelligence community to make security plans. That's just not what they do. It's not what they're equipped to do. They are not in most cases, with the exception of the FBI and the DEA, they're not domestic agencies. They're agencies that are designed to collect overseas. So it is just not a good fit. Again, I appreciate the gentleman's position. I just think the community would have to spend a lot of time and resources diverting from its real intention and mission to keep us safe. And just quickly, just for the record, I think it's important, the information that the gentleman referenced was aspirational. So I know that we saw a lot of press reports that I think misrepresented the information that was provided. It was something that Osama bin Laden thought about. It is not something that the intelligence community believes was operational, which means you have to be vigilant all the time on all these issues. So I commend the gentleman and his effort on trying to bring better security to our railways. Again, just the right tool for the right job. This is not the right place. Unfortunately, I'll oppose it, but like to work with the gentleman on the right place to get that job done, and I would reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Michigan Michigan reserves. The gentleman from Delaware has 30 seconds remaining.
I certainly thank the gentleman and appreciate his comments and certainly respect his expertise. But I can't imagine that the intelligence agencies aren't, as they're doing their activities, intelligence activities overseas, aren't finding out that there are threats to the U.S. rail system. And my amendment would just make that a priority within all the things that they do. And so with that, I yield my time and ask for a vote on the amendment.
Gentleman yields back all time. The gentleman from Michigan has time remaining.
I would yield back my time.
Gentleman from Michigan yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Delaware. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Mr. Chair, I ask for a recorded vote.
Gentleman from Delaware requests a recorded vote pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18. Further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Delaware will be postponed. What purpose does the gentleman from Michigan rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee do now arise.
The question is on the motion.